welcome to the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast. And here on the show with me for the first time, making their grand debut, are the boys from Appalachian Intelligence. That's Justin, Lance, and Ryan. And it's a pleasure to meet you three. For the audience who might not be familiar with your previous interview on the Confessionals or your awesome podcast titled Appalachian Intelligence, can you please maybe introduce yourselves quickly so people can get familiar with whose voice is who, and then maybe tell us a little bit about how your show got kicked off.
Yeah, I guess I'll go first. I'm Justin. Fellas, go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Ryan.
And I'm Lance.
And that's the three Appalachian amigos right there. Now, just to tell you a little bit about the show and how it got started and kind of what we do. Me and Ryan, we work together. We've worked together for the better part of about a year and a half. And, we work in a woodworking type of setting, but it's more like a factory setting. So we have, machinery going really loud all the time. So throughout the day, we're wearing earbuds all day long to keep the noise out. And we intake all the podcast content that we can get. And, we both really enjoyed podcasts, and we would talk about a lot of the things that we were hearing and talk about a lot of topics, just amongst ourselves, everything from science to physics to religion to the paranormal and all the weird and headlines and culture and whatever there is out there to talk about. We were talking about it, and the conversations were really interesting and intriguing, and we would go really, really deep in certain conversations. So finally we were like, man, we're having a blast doing this while we're at work. Let's just sit down and record this stuff, man, and see where it goes. Lance, I've known Lance. I mean, we grew up together. I've known Lance for 20 plus years. We've been best friends for the majority of that. You get old and adulthood comes along and work and kids, and you kind of drift apart. With this podcast, us starting it back up, Lance reached out fairly early on and was like, hey boys, I love what you guys are doing. I'd love to come on and talk if y'all would give me the opportunity. So, us being boys our whole lives, I was like, yeah, come on, man. So Lance come on, done a couple of episodes with us, and the dynamic was just so, it was just there. I'm whatever you give me, I'm a believer. I believe it all. I believe in the possibilities of anything you want to put out there. Ryan, he's a little more skeptical when it comes to certain things. He's a little more logical and reasonable.
I just like using common sense, Mark. That's just, you know what I mean?
Okay.
I like to describe myself as an open mind and a guarded heart. In case this shit turns out real, I don't want like Beelzebub infesting me or something. So
I hear that. Yeah, no. Definitely.
And Mark, I'm kind of what you would call the irrationally rational third wheel.
Okay.
I'm just kind of right down the middle of the lane. Some of it I believe, some of it I don't. And I try to bring a little more middle road clarity to some of the crazy that happens on Appalachian Intelligence.
Yeah, well, I can relate to that, Lance, and I certainly can relate to you guys, listening to podcasts at work and feeling like you needed to throw your hat in the ring. That was definitely my experience, and synchronicity just kind of made it happen in a way that I could not have expected. But here we are, all podcasting, and yeah, it's an awesome opportunity to bridge the gap between North and South Appalachia. I've hiked the Appalachia up here in Connecticut, just a small stretch, the few miles it happens to go through Connecticut. But before we go far into what I have to say, I want the listeners to understand where this sort of mystery that you guys are kind of finding yourselves in the center of, when did this start to dawn on you? Because the podcast, this was first, right? The mystery kind of came after the podcast. So what got you guys out there in the woods and to see this thing? Was it a tip that somebody sent you? Was it just you were hiking in that area one day? I mean, how did this occur initially?
Well, we actually the things that we talk about, we try to make it an open platform, bring on guests, other content creators, and just talk about as much weird stuff as possible. The weirder, the better. So we were looking into a lot of these different things and hearing so many stories and doing our own research into a bunch of different topics. And we like to focus on Appalachia. We talk about a lot of different places around the world, but we like to focus on Appalachia because, one, that's where we live and where we're from. And two, there's plenty of weird right here. You don't have to go anywhere else.
And three, Mark, it's pretty much all we know.
Yeah.
We're hill
folks. We're hill folk.
Yeah, and as far as where we're just in the woods, well, yes, because we live there.
Yeah,
that's
where we live. Through the woods to get into the woods to eventually get to the house.
But no, we were actually looking at doing like a little YouTube-y mini documentary, something along those lines, of the local river that runs through our town. It runs really close, or it runs through the Breaks Interstate Park. It runs really close to Hellier, Kentucky. I know everybody knows the name Hellier. It's literally right across the state line, probably 40 minutes away from us driving. And 40 minutes on these back roads and hollers don't mean it's very far away. No. So we were talking about doing that, and I ran into a friend of mine and a big listener, fan of the show. And we were just talking the show. We were talking this mini doc that I was thinking about doing, or we were thinking about doing. And he said, "Justin, have you ever seen those rock carvings that are on that cliff above town?" And I was like, "No, I have no idea what you're talking about." And he was like, "Here, dude, I got some pictures. Let me show you." So he pulls up these pictures, and I'm just flabbergasted right off the bat. I mean, I had no idea that this was here this close. So, I'd start talking to these boys, and I'm like, "Look, we've got to get up there and check this out. Like, this is huge." So we start talking about it. We're super busy guys. We all work full-time jobs. We all have big families. Trying to get together and do anything is almost impossible. So we held on to this for probably a month. And finally, a Sunday rolls around. It's pouring the rain that day. And we're just like, you know what? Look, let's go. I don't care what the weather's like. I don't care. I've got directions on my phone that should get us close enough. Let's just go check it out. So, yeah, man, we got some directions from this dude, and we just headed up that way and hiked into this place. And we came upon it, and it was like the skies opened up, and the angels were singing, and
it rained harder.
Yeah, like Justin said we had directions, and we did, but we had like redneck directions. Like they were like, look here for this gate that might be open. If it's not, look down to the right. That might be a forked tree that can possibly be there, and then there might be a cobweb stuck in it, and head over the cliff about 3 or 4 paces. And it's not it really wasn't directions. It was a general idea of where we thought we would be. And I was the one that was almost totally against going, simply because I just didn't want to. I don't know why. I don't know. Didn't think anything about it. Like we're from freaking Hayside. Like there's nothing here. Like there's no major thing here that's ever going to happen. I don't really want to go. But as Justin has for 25 years, he eventually peer pressured me and talked me into going. And once we eventually kind of stumbled upon this thing, none of us were really, I don't think quite, I don't know a good way to describe it. None of us were expecting what we found. And like once we walked up on it, we were all kind of like, holy cow, like we should have come here much sooner to see this rock, because it's pretty impressive really that it's there.
Wow.
It's crazy.
Yeah, and we're gonna provide the photo for folks. I've seen it. I think, if I'm correct, it was the one that Tony used as the cover art. So I'll probably do the same, just so audio listeners can immediately know what we're talking about. But for people who haven't seen it for whatever reason, can we describe what it looks like roughly? It kind of has like a odd, like, spiral, maybe tentacle, kind of like, weird lines. It doesn't really immediately appear to be anything in specific. And I heard you guys mention that it could possibly be a map, which I find really exciting if that's the case, and to where and to what you might find if you follow that map is even more interesting, I'm sure. But what did you immediately think when you saw the petroglyph?
First impressions for me when I walked up on it and just took the first glance and took the whole thing in. This thing's probably what, fellas, 2 feet long, 2.5 feet long.
Yeah.
Foot and a half wide. Just walking up on it at first glance, I looked at Justin. I was like, it looks like the profile of the Golden Gate Bridge. So if you think of the Golden Gate Bridge and you're standing there by the bay looking at it, just the way the columns are, the way the wires are on there, it looked like the profile of that bridge to me.
Like in 2D.
In 2D, with like crop circles on the outer edges of it, is I guess of a way maybe to kind of describe it. With what we think are 2 people carved on either end of this, what you would consider, what I considered what looked like a bridge. That's the way I try to describe it to people who haven't seen the pictures yet.
Yeah, it's the way that Lance is describing it right there is almost perfect, because I think, as soon as he said that, the 3 of us and also mine and Ryan's sons were there with us, we all kind of glanced down. I was like, yeah, that could definitely be that. But it's just, yeah, it is, man. It's just so strange because you have these big cavernous looking circles surrounding this thing. And then you just have these super intricate lines that are going in these really sharp edges and these fine points. And, like Lance said, not to mention the 2 humanoid looking carvings on either end of the thing. And in the pictures that we provided on there, you can't really see those extremely well. We have a couple where they come up a little better, and I'll send those to you as well, so you can put those out there if you want. But for anybody that hasn't seen the pictures of this rock, you can check them out on our Instagram, on the Confessionals Instagram. They're there. But yeah, man, it was wild. Like, it was one of those things, like, we were talking to each other. What could this be? What could this mean? What could this represent or symbolize? And obviously you're thinking, number one question there, who put this here? Like, who, what culture, how old is this?
And why?
And why,
And we just we're more lost now than ever because all these things keep popping up, man. Like, just as of recent, this, to me, this could be from the Shawnee, and we'll explain why. But it's crazy.
Well, you look at it, and like me and Ryan were looking at Shawnee artwork today, and you could see some similarities between, some of the circular patterns on this rock and some of the artwork the Shawnee would put out there. But also you look at, like ancient Welsh and Scottish rock carvings and the way that they carved everything out of around the symbol or picture or whatever they were trying to represent to kind of give it almost that 3-dimensional look to it. That style is also kind of there. I actually just got off the phone literally 20 minutes before I jumped on here with Eric, the host of the Uncomfortable podcast, and his son is a geologist. So he was like, man, my son's a geologist. If you want to send me those pictures, I'll shoot them to him and see what he has to say about it. So, his son's taking a look at it, saying that, telling all the different things about the rock and, how it's been there for who knows how long, hundreds, thousands, however many years because of the erosion around the thing, and, how it's not been moved from anywhere. And how, as far as the engravings on it, he's 99% sure that they are not natural. Now, as far as from a culture or people group, he couldn't really give much information on that. But Eric said, in his opinion, it looks like some kind of really old Spanish with their artwork and the way that they did things. So obviously you put this out there and hundreds, possibly thousands of people are looking at it. Everybody has an opinion. Everybody thinks, oh, well, it looks like this. It could be this.
Unless you go to the archaeology page on Reddit, because those pretentious bastards are all, oh, this is completely natural. Was there a building on top? I'm like, dude, it is a cliff face in the freaking woods in the Appalachian Mountains. There was no building here, okay? It's not from the foundation of a building.
Well, I am glad you said that, because now I don't have to. And yeah, I'm right there with you that the official mainstream people who claim to be experts usually just help obscure the matter more than they do elaborate on it. And yeah, if I could give my 2 cents, and not that I claim to know what this is, but maybe we can all sort of connect some dots, and this may help you guys along the way in the future. Have you ever looked into the Susquehannock tribe at all? Do you know about them? Does that ring any bells?
I've heard of them.
Okay.
Yeah, I've heard of them. I haven't really looked into them.
Well, when you said Welsh, and it made me think of them because their tribe has a language that's very similar to Gaelic, right? And there have been a couple researchers who have made this connection, not just with the Susquehannock, but with other tribes as well. The more famous is the Mandeans, who were said to actually have been Welsh immigrants from more recently who settled in the Mississippi River Valley area. But there's plenty of evidence to show that the Native Americans in the Northeast, New England, Maine, Canada, had been trading with people from Scandinavia, right? This is pretty well established by now, but it's interesting to think about what European cultures might have been here prior to Columbus. And, you know, the Spanish themselves have a tricky history with that too. Some people think that maybe they had prior knowledge that was given to them about the New World that they gathered from some source. But I have to ask you another question. When it comes to the stone itself, the surrounding area, were there any stone structures that stood out, any other stones in the area that you noticed? Because what I found is usually these things tend to be in a sort of site, you know, with multiple stones in an arrangement with one another.
Not in the direct area.
No, this stone is, you can see where there's been a breakaway, due to probably weathering and erosion and all this different stuff. And what we're talking about, this thing is literally on top of a cliff. Like if you take a step forward, you're falling probably 70 feet to your death. I mean, it's right on top. You can see where there have been breakaways in between the stone, and some of these carvings will go on to other stones surrounding this. But as far as anything else that you could look and say, okay, well, this was man-made, this is some kind of structure, or this is some kind of other carving, there's nothing else there. Now there is probably, if you step off to the left, 50 to 100 feet, something like that, there's what we've talked about, and it looks like it would be like a peak point where someone could stand there and you can see 70% of the town now. So it's right along the river. So whatever settlement would have been there, I'm sure would have also been right along the river. So it's almost like this peak point to where you could see everything that's going on, below you, everything behind you, or nobody's coming, in from behind you because you're on top of a freaking mountain. But it's one of those things like Tony brought up on the confessionals. What if this thing goes into the mountainside? What if this thing is covered by hundreds or thousands of years of dirt and soil and, all these different vegetation? We don't know. It's one of those things like this could be just a tip of a cornerstone sticking out from beneath the ground. There could be an entire complex system of whatever else there. And, we wouldn't know it unless we really started digging and excavating on the property.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely something that's been overlooked, right? And this idea that things are lying beneath the surface. You joked at the beginning that not many people seem to be interested in this kind of thing, even though it's right in their own backyard, and you guys even didn't expect to have such amazing things in your backyard. And I think that's part of the lost mythos of this country, the Native American lore, the colonial lore, and all the other amazing stories that they haven't been completely lost. There's just so many distractions that people don't, pay attention to them anymore. And I know at some point we're going to get into the whole treasure hunting saga aspect of this, and I think that's really cool. But before we do, I want to show you guys the petroglyph that's pretty interesting. It's in Massachusetts, and it's since been taken out of its original resting place and put inside of a museum. But maybe this, along with some other petroglyphs, could help inform what you guys are looking at down there. Let me share my screen for you. So let me know when you can see that.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so you guys can see the Dighton rock. Now, what's really fascinating about this rock is that if you look under his sort of right elbow there, sort of draw a line from his elbow, you see this sort of like head of a figure.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of triangle body with like almost like an hourglass shape down towards the bottom. Well, this is like a chalk outline of the petroglyphs. That's how they got this photo. But if you look at a different recreation that I have in a book on my shelf, there's like a sword in this guy's hand, what we would typically think of as like a European style sword, something that the Native Americans were told wouldn't have had unless maybe they traded for it with some group from Europe where they did have the ability to, create things out of metal. So that's one interesting thing to note with this weird petroglyph that it's quite big compared. I mean, look at this guy. He's a normal sized dude, and the rock is 4 times his size. And the petroglyph expanses across the whole face of the rock here. This was in a swamp in Dighton, Massachusetts. It's called the Dighton Rock. Now, another one that I don't know if I'll be able to find a picture of, but we could look it up, is the Susquehanna petroglyphs. And that tribe I mentioned before, the Susquehannocks, they were named, the river was named for them. They lived in this region along the Susquehanna River, which goes all the way up to Cooperstown, New York, and down to the Chesapeake Bay in Maryland. So you have these Susquehanna petroglyphs all across this enormous rock called Big Indian Rock. And I don't know if this page has a photo of it, but basically you guys are starting to get my point here, is that, there are many of these petroglyphs all over the place that are unaccounted for. Like here's a guy standing on the rock with some petroglyphs, and this might be a different place altogether, actually. But either way, just illustrating my point here that there are tons of petroglyphs that, for the most part, haven't really been acknowledged by mainstream science. Maybe it's because politics. They don't want the Native Americans to have any credit for being here, and
we're still pretending they weren't here.
Yeah, something. Or maybe it's to hide these larger secrets about what their mounds are really about, or what they're hiding in caves like treasure. Now, on the point of mounds, we don't really have a lot of mounds in the Northeast because of the soil. So they have these stone structures, and my girlfriend and I, while driving around, we saw a standing stone that was like 7 feet tall off the side of the road. So I pulled over and I took a look at it, and it was really fascinating, this standing stone. But even more fascinating was the giant, what they call by archaeological standards, glacial erratic, this giant glacial erratic that, I mean, it's shaped like a bird, you know, and I'll show you guys a picture once I get my screen share going again here. But I think, you know, with this in mind, possibly this could be something that you guys keep in mind and have in your toolbook when you're using, you know, you're looking around out there in this more southern part of the Appalachia. I don't think it would have been a stretch to imagine that what the Native Americans were doing with the ceremonial stone structures here in the Northeast is all that different from what they're doing down there. So, yeah, let me just get this going for you guys, and you can see what I'm talking about.
Yeah, for sure. Gosh, this is awesome.
I know.
I love looking at all these petroglyphs and these rock carvings.
Also, boys, next time we get up there, we gotta take some chalk with us. I didn't even think about that.
I didn't either. That won't even damage it, would it? And that would be way better pictures.
A lot, yeah, it's true.
Yeah, well, I imagine you could probably wash the chalk off and nobody would notice. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, another thing rain would take care of that eventually.
Yeah, a thing that something that Eric mentioned was there's these apps out there that you can download and it does like this 3D imaging and rotating and all this different stuff that may be a good thing to test out and try and see what we can find on that.
Like LiDAR? Are you talking about LiDAR?
Well, it's not so much LiDAR even. It's the way that he talked about it is there's apps even for your phone that will scan, you know, they do it a lot with like facial recognition and all of that different stuff. But it will scan, you know, certain objects as well. And it'll kind of 3D image it to where you can manipulate it on your screen and move it around and kind of just look at it from different angles to maybe get a clearer picture, you know, beneath the moss and the grime and the, you know, all of that.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's kind of why I want to get out at this time of year when there's no snow, you know, leaf cover and you know, it hasn't snowed yet. So it's probably easy to see these stone structures. But can you guys see this?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, we can.
So this is what caught my eye initially, this stone structure. And you can maybe see in this smaller picture here, there's my girlfriend Tara, and she's like probably, 5'5", so it's pretty big compared to her. She's only standing about a foot behind it. So, yeah, we got this big standing stone. And then right behind it is this, what I'm calling like a goose or a swan. And here I am standing next to it. I'm almost 7 feet tall, so I'm kind of big. I don't know, odd to look at me next to it. I probably make it look kind of small, but yeah, this is quite a large boulder, and it's situated on top of a much larger stone, sort of on the side of the hill. And sure enough, that arm there, if you want to call it like a stone arm, or the neck of the goose, is facing due west, right towards where the sun sets. So yeah, it's kind of odd to find stuff like this, but then we looked at the map and found out that it's right on this Hammonasset line that we found a book all about. This guy, Glenn Kreisberg, has written a book that you guys might be interested in called Spirit in Stone, and he talks about this line along with many other things in his book. And on this line that goes all the way from the tip of Long Island through Connecticut up to the Great Lakes in Canada, you have all of these stone cairns and stone structures like this one that we found just driving on a pretty well-treaded route. And then here's another forest with numerous signs of, you know, things going on. You know, I don't want to say that the Native Americans are responsible for all of this, because there were quarries in the area, but I doubt that the quarry would have left this stone like this with a tree growing out of it, you know, placing stones on top of each other like that, or even these two stones, which you can't really tell from the picture. They're massive and they're not connected to each other. They weren't once a part of each other. They're just sort of two massive stones that are on top of each other. Here's another angle of that same stone on top of a larger stone. And if you look at it from the side, kind of a zoomed out perspective, you could maybe infer the shape of some sort of animal, kind of like what Tony was showing you guys about what he found in Pennsylvania, also on the Appalachian Mountains or near the Appalachian Mountains. So yeah, it's just odd to find all of these things that you think would have an explanation, and the only explanation we're given from archaeologists for all of these things is that, oh no, the glaciers left them like this. It was just the glaciers melted and all these stones ended up in weird positions, you know. And I just think that's BS, especially when you look at all of the triangular shapes, like this triangle cut I found, this triangle pyramidal boulder. You often find the granite with like quartz inside of it or other crystals. That seems to be important. And I've also found like what looks like faces in the stone, you know, like this sort of face here. Here's another face. This one's a little more obvious with the line drawing, kind of helps you see it. But the faces in stone are kind of significant spiritually. What the Native Americans would call some of these stones were like, basically the word meant spirit stone, right? Hence the title of that book. And here's a stone that we found that's shaped kind of like a face. I mean, you tell me what you think.
I can see the eyes.
Right? So, you know, these stones were, we found in like a sort of significant area near water. And when you start to pick up on these clues of like what areas tend to have these things and what to look for, you often find like many more things like this. Again, another stone face with what looks like an eye burnt into it, or maybe carved with like some sort of charcoal or something.
That looks really serpentine,
right?
So, I'm really glad now, guys. When I climbed down the face of where that rock is, and I took a few pictures. Guys, remember the little thing I told you looked like it was holding like some sort of spear or rod, and it has a face? Like, it's very clear.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I could send this to you right now, Mark. I don't know how, but
that's all right. I'm going to edit this video a bit, so even if you want to just send it to me in post, like the other video picture you're going to send, and I'll just like kind of paste them on the screen for people to see. If you want to just describe it. Yeah, just describe it for me.
It's just kind of, it's like a little short, stout figure, and you can see the eyes, like they're kind of looking down and they're just kind of squinted. The nose and jutting out from the chest area looks like it would be holding something out, like it was defending that rock.
Wow, like a puckwadgie. Have you guys ever heard of the puckwadgie?
Yes, exactly like that.
We love the puckwadgie.
They got those up here. There's some stories that the Mohegan tribe have. They're kind of famous for their casino, but they have a very interesting stone site near their territory, and it's called Gunjiwamp. You guys could look this up at home, and you three can look it up. It's GungyWamp, and one of the theories about this place is that it was used by some sort of Gaelic, Celtic type group, because they have these what are they called? The dolmens. They're like, you know, two stones with one much larger stone on top of it. And these aren't taller than a human, like they're less than 6 feet tall. They're not extremely big, but at first they're like, oh, these are just colonial root cellars, and they're not made by the Native Americans. But then Tara and I found this book and other books by a guy named James Gage and Mary Gage. I think they're a couple, and they've basically proved that all of these stone sites and structures, stone walls and whatnot, were, for the most part, originally built by the Native Americans, and then some of them were built by farmers. So Yeah, I mean, hopefully that helps you guys on your quest, pick up some clues. Whenever you see a stone wall, think twice about where it leads to, especially when it's not near a farm, because that's an indication that it's much older. And yeah, I think these white stones too, the quartz stones, have something to do with it. You mentioned that this petroglyph is at a very high point, like a viewpoint. That's a theme as well. You often find these massive like boulders at the top of a mountain, and some of them happen to be these all white quartz. And some people say that those are called like beacon stones, where on a sunny day you could see it from far away, kind of like gleaming, and maybe if you wanted to send somebody a signal, you'd light a fire near it and the smoke would change the way it looked, right? Because a daytime fire signal isn't going to work as effectively as a nighttime one. But if you have this, shiny stone that's normally reflecting a shimmer, and then you see smoke in front of it, that's possibly a daytime warning. And yeah, it's fascinating to think about the spiritual context of these things. Often in European folklore, there's the word about treasure being associated with spiritual beings. I mean, I'm using the word spiritual, but we can insert the word energy, metaphysical beings, otherworldly beings, leprechauns, dragons, all these different things. So on that note, have you guys got the sense? I mean, you're on the Confessionals podcast. I was expecting a Sasquatch to throw a rock at you when I was listening. Did you have any odd experiences with the petroglyph, like anything that made the hair on the back of your neck stand up?
Well,
the petroglyph itself gave me chills when we first seen it, and then the comment from that dude off of Reddit.
That's what I was just getting ready to get into. It was one of those things, Mark, when we got there, I've described it before as, for me, it felt almost like you hear somebody describing a shamanic experience. Now, I know these boys, it was a little different. But for me, it was like just for a few moments, I could feel every raindrop hitting my skin. I just felt this sense that my spidey senses were tingling. I mean, it felt important, and I don't know, I can't tell you whether it was a good energy or a bad energy. I just know that there was an energy there. And sending these pictures out and talking to different people out there in the field, and people that are into the weird like we are, I sent it out to Steve, who from Hollow Sky podcast, who, he has a lot of time spent in research and on the native tribes, and just native culture in general. So I sent them to him and I was like, dude, do you have any idea? Have you ever seen anything like this? So he put them on a couple geology forums, and one of the comments that came across one of these geology forums was, "This is where the old gods meet." And man, when we got that comment, it was just like, whoa. Because I mean, if you think about it, that's what the natives did. That's where they would go communicate with their gods or, their ancestors. They would go on top of these mountains, these high places, and they would have these ritualistic ceremonies and all these places, that they would go to. And that's where they communicated with the entities, whoever they were trying to communicate with.
Right.
So, how did they do that? Did they do it through ritualistic purposes? Maybe. Did they? We don't know for sure. A bunch of different tribes and different cultures did things differently, but now a lot of them were similar. We do know that there were sacrifices that were done. We do know that there was bloodletting.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let me tell you this. Tara and I were on a hike. Only the next town over, we find all these stone structures, and we go and look in one of these old, colonial record books about the, early encounters with the Native Americans. And the very tribe that was in that spot was sacrificing a child when they were encountered by this group. And, you know, a lot of times they would sort of exaggerate the savagery of the Native Americans, but still there's a truth in it. And it's not just the Native Americans who took part in this. But you shouted out Kyle and Steve. I want to give them a shout out over at Hollow Sky. They've been on the show before. And Pennyroyal was kind of ringing in my ears when you said old ones. Nathan Isaac's been on the show.
That's so crazy. It's so good. I'm sorry. I didn't want
to cut you off.
I don't want to cut you off right there. But I listened to so nuts. I listened to 2 My Family Thinks I'm Crazy episodes today while I was at work.
Yeah.
Interview with Steve and Kyle and the interview with Nathan Isaacs from Pennyroyal. And I'll tell you, which is a crazy synchronicity, crazy. But just to give a little shout out to Nathan Isaacs too. You know, I haven't spoken with the guy. I plan on doing that one day. But listening to Pennyroyal and what he did there and the things, the connections that he made, and just this sense of look into what's in your own backyard, you know, find your story, you know, be the independent researcher and journalist in your own backyard, because I'm sure, even though it may seem mundane, even though everybody may be walking around like NPCs and not care about this super awesome rock carving right in your hometown, go figure it out, go find it.
Right.
So what he did there for us, and it was almost like, you know, it was unintentional. Like, yeah, we were looking at this mini doc and we were like, let's show the importance of where we're from. Let's show the weird. Let's show, you know, actual historical things that happen that can relate to all these different things. But then when we started doing that, dude, it was just like doors were being opened that we had no idea. It's like we were being led to this next piece of information and then this next piece. And the deeper we dive and the more we dig, the more that opens up. But
it keeps getting weirder too.
Yeah, dude. With him,
you got it concentrated by the power of 3 here with the 3 of you. Yeah, for sure. I can imagine it's sped up quite a bit.
I've never even thought about that part of it. I've never even thought about that.
As much as you look at the number 3, Justin.
I don't know. You would
think I thought about that, Justin, and just didn't put that in your brain because we didn't need to jump down that rabbit hole again.
Well, we're in it now. We're in it now. So you all might as well get ready. But anyway, just one more thing about Nathan Isaacs and Pennyroyal before we move on. Sorry, I didn't mean to get into this little tangent. You mentioned those 2 guys or those 3 guys, you know, right. That just blew my mind. But he said something really early on in the first 2 or 3 episodes of Pennyroyal. Oh, and also, you know, the places that he's talking about, especially with Dan Dutton and, you know, doing this well, the Secret Commonwealth, this play that he's going to put on, they talked about doing In the Breaks Interstate Park. That's in our hometown. This tribute to Pan. It's in our hometown. It's Breaks Interstate Park.
10 or 15 minutes from this rock.
So you guys heard that and were like, holy crap.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was like one of those things. Okay, if they're coming here to investigate, why are we not investigating? We're here.
Right.
Like, if they're coming here to do weird stuff, why aren't we here looking into it anyway?
Well, and that's, I'm so glad that we're kind of taking a tangent into this, because and I hope to have you 3 on this show. My girlfriend and I, along with 2 friends, Chad from Detroit, Michigan, and Roman, who lives over in California. He hosts a podcast called Rising from the Ashes. We started a show called Esoteric America, and for that purpose, to have folks like yourself on who are researching that, you know, whatever their local area is. And there's so much to get into that, you know, one episode just isn't enough, but we like to have people on to talk about, you know, whatever it is they got going on. And we've covered a bunch of places so far. And when you said old ones, another thing that kind of ticked a button for me is H.P. Lovecraft, right? He famously wrote about the old ones, and he's from this area that I live in, and is sort of east of me, but one of his stories is about a site that my girlfriend and I have been to called Makamuda State Park. It's a basis of his Dunwich Horror. And in the colonial times, they said that at the base of this cavern was a medieval carbuncle making these crazy noises. And I go and I look up like what a carbuncle is, and it's got like this crazy, definition. It's some kind of like crystal, some sort of like, some people say it's like a being, but the Native Americans, they thought that it was like a god that, whenever they had maybe something negative that they needed to take care of, maybe they had a problem they needed solved, and then the good God wouldn't do it for them, they'd turn to the bad God who represented all things bad, right? And they would appease him somehow. And this is, simplified to a large degree, but to your point about like sacrifice, like, dude, it's happening everywhere. And that guy, H.P. Lovecraft, was literally in the area where, Native Americans were doing that kind of stuff. So it's not that far removed to connect all these things, as strange as that may seem to people who are new to it. You guys don't seem new to it at all. And I love that feeling of like, oh my gosh, this is here. I'll tell you another one before I let you guys continue. I just got a book called Weird America by Jim Brandon. And in the book, lists all these towns. Every state has different towns it talks about, sort of encyclopedically. And I go to the Connecticut section and I see that my hometown is there. I'm like, my hometown? I'm like, there's nothing going on in my hometown. What do you And it turns out that like 3 blocks away from where we just moved, there were underground tunnels that they dug up in the 80s when they were putting a sewer in. So I'm like, all right, now I'm living on top of underground tunnels. I haven't even gone close to that rabbit hole yet. I don't want to look into it, but I know that we're kind of venturing on the subterranean realms here with this conversation. So maybe that was an appropriate segue, right?
Yeah, for sure. That's a great segue. Great
Holy
segue.
crap.
Well, yeah, man. I mean, you talk about these tunnels, you got to think like we're sitting probably right on top of a good portion of the Mammoth Cave system. Even you where you are probably sitting on top of a portion of the Mammoth Cave system, because they honestly don't know how far this thing goes.
What is it? 1% of 1% is mapped.
Well, that's all caves in the world. All
caves in the world, yeah.
There's like 420 miles, something like that, of the Mammoth Cave system that have been explored and mapped. And that's just, don't quote me on that one. That's just an estimate. But they think that it's so much farther than this. I mean, and you in our area especially, you take in all the mining that have been done, all the old abandoned mines, and it's just, we're literally living on top of Swiss cheese. I mean, that's what's underneath. Yeah. So who knows? I mean, there could be an infinite amount of possibilities of beings and creatures, and who knows what kind of ecosystems going on underneath our feet that we have no idea. Like, we have no idea about. It's just amazing that, and you talking about these tunnels where you're at, it's just, we start looking more and more and more into this stuff, and it's always high places and subterranean places. It's like this liminal space, even though we're operating in a physical world, in a physical realm, and we're touching, we're living the lives that we're living. It's like we're constantly living in a constant liminal space of the in-between of the entities in the high places and the entities in the subterranean places. And we're stuck in that battle between. It's just, you think about it like that, man, and it's just like, gosh, we're just along for the ride. I mean, we're just going with the flow.
And I'm glad he mentioned H.P. Lovecraft, because that's like, he's my favorite, of one of my favorites of all time. Like, that's how I got into the weird, Mark. Is ghosts and all that. I need to see something for me to be into that, but talking about these archaeologists saying, oh, it's a trick of the mind and all that, you're seeing things. But H.P. Lovecraft once said, the strongest emotion in mankind is fear. And the strongest fear for mankind is the unknown. So I just think these dudes don't want to admit to this crap or, give anything to it for fear of being ostracized by their communities or whatever. But but this stuff really, when we say it gets weird, Martin, me saying that is because now, like, crap's happening where it actually affects me. And I'm thinking, what the hell was that? I woke up, I've had a lucid dream now, and I've had a dream the other night. I woke up screaming to where my son came in the room asking, is dad screaming? And this shit, it just plagues me. And I can't stop thinking about it. And it's all this crap Justin dove into. He's bringing these demons in on us. But it all kind of ties together, I think.
What happened?
Oh, sorry, Mark. Go ahead.
No, it's all right. What happened in the dream? Is that all you remember? Just the screaming and what happened after you woke up?
Oh no, I was in a like a basement, like a stone walled basement. And
like a subterranean place.
Yeah, and I could hear all these people talking, and then that would go away, and I would hear a baby crying. And I was trying to find this baby because I'm like, holy shit, there's a baby down here. I got to get this baby out of here. And then I would realize, oh my God, this is a trap. And I'd take off running. And the instant I would take off running, I would end up in this room. And there was this dude in there, and he was massive. He's really tall. And I can't remember facial features. I kind of compare him to Jim Carrey's character, The Mask, but he wasn't in a yellow suit. I want to say it was a green one, but I can't tell you for sure. But I know he was wearing a hat, like one of those zoot suit riot hats, And he was doing something at a table, and he would never turn towards me. And if I ran to the left, I would come in on his right. And if I ran to the right, I would come on in his left. And he would just turn his head, and he had yellow eyes and like really dark teeth, not dirty, but like obsidian. And he had this huge Joker smile, and I was terrified. And anytime I would see him, all I could do was scream. I couldn't ask him. I wanted to ask him who he was, what was going on, and I would just scream, and I woke up. The last time I ran in that room, I woke up screaming.
Jeez. Yeah. Wow.
And I can't stop thinking about him, and it's driving me nuts. And I also recently stopped taking gummies because I got to take a drug test soon, and that's affecting me too. So
okay, well, that might explain the sudden influx of dreams, But yeah, wow, I don't blame you for feeling a little apprehensive, especially when you're looking into the lore and the countless stories of people who have experienced strange and sometimes even life-threatening things, or even worse, things that have killed them. But when it comes to these caves and the petroglyphs, are they in proximity to anything like maybe the Hopkinsville goblins or any other stories that you can track down? Like maybe not directly this location, but what are some of the things that this site is in proximity to?
Well, like we mentioned earlier, we're literally right across the mountain from Hellier, Kentucky, where, the Newkirks got all those accounts about the goblins coming out of the caves or the mine shafts there.
Justin, just go ahead and tell them about Chief Cornstalk. Just go ahead and get into it.
Well, that's more involved with the treasure. That gets into the treasure part of it. As far as we're in proximity to, we're about 45, 50 minutes from the West Virginia border, 30, 40 minutes from the Kentucky border. And I say minutes. And, when people talk about driving or taking a country mile, there's a reason for that. It takes a long time to drive a country mile on these back roads. Mm-hmm. So they're literally just right over different mountains and ridges and hollers to get to these places. So, how much weird is in West Virginia. How much weird is in Kentucky, eastern, central Kentucky. This rock, it's right along the border of Kentucky, West Virginia, Tennessee. So it's right there smack dab in the middle of weird central Appalachia. We've had all kinds of sightings and accounts around everything from Bigfoot to flying, winged humanoid type accounts. Of course, there's a bunch of little people accounts from around here and getting on down into Western North Carolina, especially. So yeah, I mean, it's right in the middle of weird Appalachia. So there's a lot of that, but I guess since Lance is dying to segue into this treasure, he's dying.
Well, didn't the Hellier boys, they're the ones who we didn't put it together until now, but weren't they the ones talking about there was a cornstalk carving over here somewhere?
Well, it wasn't them. It was one little clip from an episode of Hellier where they were talking to a guy. I don't remember exactly where he was from, but he mentioned a carving of a cornstalk in the neighboring town from where we live. But I guess the weirdest thing about all this is what this rock opened up. And this rock was an adventure in itself, and we're going to throw some things out there that says, okay, maybe possibly these two things are connected. But I think the more that we look into it, we think this is two separate mysteries, just two separate adventures that we're kind of on, and if this rock turns out to be absolutely nothing at all, it's still opened up this massive, awesome. Yeah, it's still awesome, but it's opened up this massive quest that we're on now with this John Swift silver mine and the lost caches possibly of silver that goes along there. But Lance does a way better job of this because this all started with Lance. So take it away, buddy.
Yeah. So like I said, I was the third wheel to this podcast party and still am.
You were never the third wheel.
But
never.
I came in late and have known Justin for
Lance, you're the sack that holds this scrotum together, buddy.
Exactly right. So, a nice tight paint that holds everything together. But I've known Justin forever and met Ryan and have become. It feels as if I've known Ryan forever now. Over the year and a half we've been doing this, but we had this picture, had this rock. I didn't want to go. Eventually, we got up there. I saw the rock, took the picture of the rock, talked about the rock. It was all during the summer. So I teach high school at a public high school here, about 45 minutes from where these boys live. And was just talking to one of my colleagues about the picture of this rock. We were talking, got back to school and talking about summer vacation, as old whites do when we get together. And so we were just talking about different things. And I just mentioned the picture of this rock and how we had made some minor connections to the John Swift silver mine that is in another area very close to us, over on Pine Mountain in Kentucky on the border. And there had been some carvings over there that were very similar to what we had seen. And I'm just talking to my colleague about this and we're just rattling off about it. So he starts to ask me some questions about the rock and about the John Swift silver mine and what I know about it. So I just given him just an information dump of what we spent like 2 weeks doing. And he just keeps looking at me. And I can kind of see like the gears turning in his head as I'm talking to him. Now this gentleman that I work with is a well-traveled guy. He's been all over the place. They pulls a camper pretty much all across America. He's a history buff and just a natural storyteller and just a collector of information. And just a collector of stories and a collector of information. So as I'm telling him this stuff, I can kind of see the wheels turning. So I give him all the information that I've gotten about this rock. There's the pictures. We've seen some stuff about John Swift silver mine that looks similar to it. Don't know much about the Swift silver mine, but are starting to look into and explore just some of the different mythologies and some of the different stories about this Swift silver mine. So I get done and he stops and kind of looks at me and then proceeds for the next hour and a half to completely blow my mind. And to make a really, really long story not as long, essentially what happened is that His father was trying to buy some land on the Treasure Coast in Florida as a retirement place, and had been in contact with a gentleman down there who had the land and was going to sell it to him. And the gentleman that I work with was kind of taking over the negotiations because his father was older, and it was just easier for him to kind of help negotiate. And this Mr. Anderson, who is the gentleman who has the land, who lived in Florida on the Treasure Coast, he described him to me as just eccentric, high energy, just a mile a minute, mouth moving all the time, brain going everywhere, just a really high energy guy that just talk really fast and kind of hard to keep up with at times just because of how fast his brain worked and how quick his mouth went. In the process of them negotiating to get this land sold, it comes to find out that this Mr. Anderson actually sold the land to somebody else, okay, and kind of went back on a deal that they had made and felt really bad about it. So as a penance for kind of coming back on the deal, gives him this information about this John Swift silver mine and tells him that he knows the location of the John Swift silver mine very close to the area which we live at here in Southwest Virginia. And I'll say this a couple of times throughout this story, but he tells Mr. Sayers, the guy that I work with, Mr. Anderson, who is the guy who has the story, tells him that he's seen the mine and there is billions of dollars in silver in this mine, that he was unable to get it out while he was here in the 80s because he wasn't from the area. It's going to be quite the undertaking legally. Just the excavating of it alone would have been fairly expensive. It's on national forest land, so it's going to be a whole bunch of legal hoops that he had to jump through as well. So he never got back around, just kind of didn't follow through on looking for this silver. Why would you not if you knew there was billions of dollars in silver there? That story takes no turn. This Mr. Anderson, who lives on the Treasure Coast, made his fortune because he found one of pieces of Christopher Columbus's ship and found some of Blackbeard's treasure on the Treasure Coast. Now, there are articles about this. This is a legitimate thing that took place. This isn't just a pretty story like this. There's got concrete evidence that proves that he has found this. This guy's what we would call a professional treasure hunter because he's found it. Like he's been there and done that. And he's telling Mr. Sayers about this John Swift silver mine and in the location that it's in. Now, he gives him X marks the spot on some older maps, and he has marked the spot by doing dowsing. I don't know if it's a kind of an Appalachian thing. I don't know if you know what that is, but dowsing is taking metal rods and allowing either the centrifugal force of the earth or magnetics or whatever it is to kind of point those rods in the direction. Sometimes as they cross, I know around here, some of the old folks will use them to help find whales and all the different type of things. There's a whole bunch of, it's folky, right? It's not totally scientific, but
it's
there's
funny.
a lot of.
My dad works for the water department, and when I was a kid, he showed me how this works, and he said that the water department in our state actually uses this as a sort of tool. Not, they don't make public announcements about it, but yeah, it's a part of their toolkit.
Right. So this dowsing is how he X marked the spot on the map of this silver mine, and he had seen it with his own eyes as well. And so in the process of all this, Mr. Sayers, the guy I work with, is, why in the world is he telling me this? And there's no possibility that this could be true, right? Because this is too crazy of a story. Just some random guy that you had talked to for a couple months, tells you this huge, fantastical story of all those billions in silver. Why is he telling me this? And there's no way this is true. So he begins to ask Mr. Anderson, again, the gentleman with the information, some questions. And he sends him on another treasure hunt to kind of back up and give more evidence for the fact that this silver mine is really here. So he tells Mr. Sayers to go to a little place south of Cincinnati, and that he has dowsed, X marked the spot, a mound that has precious metals in it. that he doesn't have the land deeds because he's in Florida, it's in Cincinnati, doesn't know the property owner. But if he will go into the local courthouse and find these things, then go to this area and figure out who owns the land and ask him if he can dig it up, he can find like legitimate precious metal, gold, silver, whatever. So we're about 3 hours south of Cincinnati, and Mr. Sayers thinks, I've got to at least go. I've got to go try. Like, I've got to at least go check it out, right? It's probably not true, but we've got to at least go try. So he and his brother drove up and went to the little town, and went to the courthouse. It was the old style courthouse, you know. It still had stuff on the microfilm, and nothing really digitized quite yet. They're going through all of the different files and different land deeds, and they found the landowner, and found the address to where this location was, and they had the maps from Mr. Anderson, and drove up to the property, which is a little farmhouse, and drove up and with their metal detectors and their papers and their map, and went up and knocked on the door. Asked these people if they could go explore this area on their land. Well, nobody was there. Nobody was home. So they went back and waited 15 minutes, and nobody showed up. Maybe they just went to town to get something, whatever. We'll wait till somebody gets here. About an hour and a half later, nobody shows up. Not seeing any signs of anybody. Mr. Sayers says, I'm not driven all this way to at least not go check. Right? So they take the metal detectors, they hop the fence, they go out to the place, X marks the spot, they put the metal detector down, and they get an instant boom, a high precious metal ping on their metal detector. So obviously there's something there. People never show up. They have to leave and get back. Eventually go back and do some more digging around or whatever. They come to find out that where that is at is actually an old Indian burial ground. So there is no excavation that's going to take place because of the walls and different things we got around that. But he got definitely 100% a precious metal ping on his metal detector. So he goes back and calls Mr. Anderson and tells him, all right, this is what happened. We found this gold, essentially. We couldn't get to it because of the laws of the land or whatever. But this definitely happened. He then proceeds to tell him that all up and down the East Coast, Mr. Anderson is telling Mr. Sayers, all up and down the East Coast during the Civil War are these caches of silver and gold that the soldiers would throw down in the outhouses and cover them up so that the other armies couldn't find them. And there is several locations up and down the East Coast at where this is at. Okay, so now the guy that I work with has a couple of instances that this story has checked out. Got the articles from him finding the treasure in Florida, did his own treasure hunt where he found actual precious metals, just couldn't get to it because of the laws, couldn't get it excavated. So there's obviously some legitimacy to what this guy said. So he calls him back. Okay, I'm in. Tell me more. So Mr. Anderson proceeds to tell him some specific details about where this silver mine is at, and the location of it and what to look for and some indicators, and gives him maps and all this sort of thing. So he's telling me all this, and I'm starting to take notes and just write as fast as I can, try to consume as much of the information as I can without stopping him because I didn't want to lose his train of thought. He then proceeds to tell me that he spent about 10 years looking for this mine in this location. He's got his own maps. He's got pinged locations that he's been to where he's found some interesting things. He sees caverns, huge boulders that appear to be covering up these caverns, but he's yet to find the actual silver mine itself, but he has a pretty good idea of where he thinks that it's at. Now, the silver mine has been looked for hundreds of years. It is a local legend here in Southwest Virginia, Eastern Kentucky, Tennessee, like in our local area here. It's a legend that's been around for forever. And people have looked for it for a long, long time. And they've looked for it and are continuing to look for it over on Pine Mountain, which again borders Kentucky and Virginia, and really close to where we live. The location of the silver mine that Mr. Anderson gave us, or gave Mr. Sayers, Mr. Anderson now passed away, but where we think this silver mine is at is not the same place that everybody else is looking for. Okay. What does that have to do with this rock, right? Well, there are some carvings and things that line up very similarly to the silver mine and locations of the silver mine, even some similar carvings over on Pine Mountain that are not identical but have some similarities to the rock that we found in our hometown. But it actually, we didn't realize this for a while, but there's quite a bit of correlation, at least in the story. Maybe there are, I don't like the word synchronicities, Mark. I never have. I don't know why. I think unusual coincidences, when we try to make it sound fancy by calling it synchronicities. Yeah, I guess it's the same things, right? It's 6 one way, half dozen another. But there are some unusual coincidences that have popped up because of this story and because of this rock. Okay. And that essentially, Mr. Sayers has been up there looking for it. He said, we got to go during the cold months because there's rattlesnakes and copperheads everywhere. It's pretty treacherous terrain. You're up and down rock faces. There's a rattlesnake den looming around every corner, essentially. Tells stories about him kind of going around a cliff face and sticking his hand to hold it into a hole, and there's a rattlesnake that's looking at him, and he's had to pull his hand back. So this is the kind of the time of the year to go look for it. We were planning on going over Christmas break, and we got busted with some negative, like, dangerously cold weather here for about a week. So that we've had to push back our exploration date. But we're looking to get up there very, very soon to look for this silver mine, which then correlates right back to the rock and some silver caches that might be around it. But I'll let Justin tell that story because he knows a lot more about it. He's a better teller of that story than I am.
Well, with all this going on, obviously we find this rock in at the end of July. School starts back with Lance. He's finding out all this information, middle of August, 1st of September. So we have months because Mr. Sayers is telling us, look, boys, you do not want to go up there this time of year. You may not make it back out. So obviously, yeah, we're all about finding some treasure. I'm not exactly all about dying and trying to do it. Now, if I get a sniff of this silver, that might change. But as of now, I'm trying to tread a little lightly. So we have months to research. Like Lance said, this has been a local legend. People have been looking at this since, the late 1700s. So one great thing about all this is John Swift himself left a set of journals. Not all of these journals have been found, but there have been a combination of different entries from different journals that he left with a love interest in Bean Station, Tennessee, before he passed away. Okay, and in these journals, there's a lot of different entries to where Swift talks about how, because of raiders, local native chiefs that would try to raid and swipe some of this silver from his party, from the mine, different settlers that were around, everybody was broke at that time. Not a lot's changed since, but everybody, that was a quick way.
They may be broker now than they were then.
Yeah, well, we're definitely broker than Swift, but everybody was trying to get a quick buck by raiding and getting some of this silver while he was transporting. So in these journals, there are a lot of different entries to where he talks about burying a cache of silver. Now, at this time, in his journals, he talked about certain mountains that had tunnels going all throughout the mountain to where they had multiple entrances and exits, and to where a man could be inside a tunnel in the mountain and hear the hoofbeats of a rider on top of the mountain. So he's said to have placed a couple of caches of silver in some of these locations. But another thing that is said about the Swift silver mine is that there was an upper and a lower mine. Now, some people have deciphered that as to meaning that there was a mine, somewhere local here, and then some people believe around the Red River Gorge area of Kentucky. To me, it doesn't make sense to have two separate parts of a mine in the 1760s, hundreds and hundreds of miles apart. It doesn't make sense to me. It makes more sense to me that an upper and lower mine would have been a place for actually mining the silver, and then a place for smelting it down into currency that could be used at that time. Now, with the whole upper and lower mine aspect of it, It's said, and I think Mr. Anderson himself said, that while he was there back in the 80s looking for this silver, he witnessed and observed a natural staircase where he thought this was supposed to be. Now, since then, there have been roads that have been built through there. So the natural staircase may not be there anymore. But if you look at this little intricate, sharp angles and stuff throughout the middle of the carvings that we found on this rock, it looks like it could possibly be some form of staircase or ladder, something of the sort. Now, with these cavernous spaces above and below this possible staircase, you have a humanoid figure on the top. You have a humanoid figure on the corner of the bottom, which could represent possibly an upper and a lower mind with this natural staircase in between. Possibly. But even more interesting about Swift's journals, even if this rock is totally separate, that's the connection we were trying to make with this rock and the mine. But even if this rock has absolutely zero to do with the mine, Swift makes a journal entry talking about how from the headwaters of Big Sandy Creek, now the river that runs through our town wouldn't have been called the river. It wouldn't have had the name that it has today. The people of that time would have taken the name of the biggest river. So you have the Big Sandy River that runs through, or the headwaters are moving out of Mouthcard, Pikeville, Kentucky, that area. So anything that went off of that, the majority of the people then would have called it a creek. Any kind of tributary that ran off of the main headwaters, main river, they would have called it a creek, because it's technically not a river. So he says from the headwaters of Big Sandy Creek due southwest, a certain amount or a certain distance, myself, and this is Swift talking, myself, a guy named Mundy, and another guy buried $25,000 to $30,000 worth of silver around a, quote, peculiar looking rock next to a, quote, Indian grave. That's a piece that we left out. Like I said, this certain distance from the Big Sandy headwaters. Now, I believe, based on the trajectory and looking at the maps and looking at what I think that he is talking about with Big Sandy Creek, I think that he could possibly be talking about our rock. He also said there in the journals that him, Mundy, and this other guy carved their initials and a compass rose and a trowel into a big old tree close to this peculiar looking rock and this Indian grave. Now, when we went to go look at the rock, there's this huge stack of stone that looks like a small little mound right at the top of the ridge, and actually a power line right away. It's in the middle of a power line right away, but it's not touched. It hasn't been destroyed. It hasn't been taken out and cleared like the rest of the land around it. And we were kind of joking at the time, saying, well, this is some kind of mound. We know the natives have been here and done this. And we were just pretty much joking at the time. Well, when I find this entry in the journal, I'm like, holy crap. If you look up what Indian graves, what these sailors were, that's what they were. They were on top of these mountains, just isolated, and they were just these stacks of stone to make these small little mounds on top of, whatever deceased native was there. So we see that, but most interesting out of all of this, that's all connections that we can make, but we're missing a piece, right? We're missing the tree. So I'm actually at a family friend's birthday party. And I'm sitting there and I'm just talking, nothing about, anything weird. I'm trying to act as normal as possible, in this setting. But this guy starts talking and somebody asks a question about, because the Cliff Rock carvings episode had just dropped. So somebody there had asked a question about the carvings. So I'm talking a little bit about it. And a guy that's there, I don't mention anything about the journals. Actually, I don't even know if I'd stumbled upon the journals at this point. He says, yeah, he said the well site that's up there really close to that rock. He said, I built that well site, that gas well site. I ran the excavator up there to build this site. He said, I went down and checked out the rock on our lunch break, just totally nonchalantly, like he was talking about the weather. It's really strange, man. Those carvings are really strange. I said, yeah, they are. Well, I talked a little bit more about it. And he said, the funny thing about it is when I was there, and now we're talking like early 90s when he was up there. He said, the funny thing about it when I was there, he said, you have that rock and you have these carvings, but there was also this big old beech tree that I pushed over with the excavator that had all these funny carvings in it. It had like some people's initials and what looked like a compass or something. And I was in shock.
Mark, I don't up and ask a question because you get the same reaction we had when he first told us that.
That's the exact same reaction.
Jeez, no, please go on. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm just sort of soaking it all in. I mean, yeah, I can see why you guys are feeling astounded. It's astounding, right? And then to have that confirmation with a guy that you just happen to know is crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, to kind of shorten this down and kind of come to the conclusion of this little side part of it, we think that there's a great possibility. In my theory, our theory, I think to this point, and just based on the journals and what Swift wrote, we think that there's probably dozens of caches of silver that at least were there at the time that Swift wrote these journals. Now, could people have come behind him, guys that he worked with, natives that knew about it, all these different things? Could they have come by and swapped some of this stuff? Absolutely. But we do know for sure that there have been coins found in our area. We know that there's been a silver bar found in our area. So the evidence is there that this stuff is still out there. Now, if you have $25,000 to $30,000 worth of silver buried in 1768, that equals just that small little cache itself equals an ungodly amount of money in today's dollar amount. I mean, and it's amazing to think that there could be all of these caches in the surrounding area. Maybe they're, all these legends and everybody that you talk to in Central Appalachia believes that the John Swift silver mine is in their hometown. It's right here. But I will say, and I will confidently say, that I don't think there's anybody out there that has as much information as we do about where this thing is. Now, of course, obviously, there's going to be a whole lot of red tape and legal stuff that you're going to have to look at and getting into. And we've already been, hashing out game plans for all that and looking at all these different things and all these situations on, okay, if we do find this, what's the next step? And then the step after that and the step after that. The last thing we want is putting it out there right off the bat and the government comes swooping in. I mean, you got suits that are dying to get back into these mountains any possible chance that they can get.
We're probably already hearing a dumb.
Yeah, well, yeah, for sure. And hopefully they're not hearing this, but we've been kind of vague, and I don't want to ask for specifics. I think you guys should be vague about specific locations if you haven't already revealed it. But on the point of locales, there's a lost state that I don't know if many people outside of this area would know about. Hopefully you guys know about it. Have you ever heard of the lost state of Franklin?
Yep. I actually just got done researching that into a lot more information that I've came across.
So this was where I was hoping we would find a connection. I had thought of it as we were talking. I'm like, didn't I just learn something about this area? So for folks who don't know, the lost state of Franklin officially was around from I guess the 1784 to 1788. Maybe it was around longer than that, but that's the official story. And apparently, one of the reasons why they'd been broken up was because of some meddling on the part of Spain. Spain sent an agent out to Franklin to get involved somehow, and then North Carolina came in and drove out the Cherokee and the Chickasaw. And you mentioned that like little tidbit of like, oh, well, it could be Spanish according to this one guy. So we know Spanish were in the area. Not that I think that's necessarily the most interesting thread, but the Cherokee, of all the Native Americans, they have some of the most interesting myths, and they also have some of the most interesting legends about them. One of them being that they had paved streets and brick homes. Like, this is something that I heard recently. I'm like, that's incredible. So to think they had brick homes and paved streets, I mean, it's not out of the question to suggest they might have an underground cave or something like that, have the ability to reinforce a cave and, you know, maybe even go quite far. Like you said, those tunnels in the Mammoth Cave system haven't been panned out. And there's this whole lore about the Underground Railroad, right, that freed so many slaves. And to bring up another kind of lost group rather than a state, the Knights of the Golden Circle, who are famous for kind of the, you know, trying to redeem the lost cause of the South, or at least that's what the North says. I don't know how you folks feel about it. I don't want to, I don't take any sides. I'm about patriotism, not North versus South. So
you're not gonna get any guff out of us, man.
Well, good, but I do think that they're somehow, they could be involved, right? There was this whole network of agents on the part of the South who, you know, were trying to recover a lot of the gold that they had stashed during the various battles. And I'm sure if, you know, they were foreseeing a loss, they would probably take all the gold away as soon as they could before it was seized by the North, you know, in whatever battle. I'm not getting specific, but just speculating there. Yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of locations around the South that have these sort of caches hidden.
Yeah, for sure. And that's, you know, that's something that we're looking more and more and more into. But, you know, throughout this process, you know, like we said earlier, it seems like the more we dig and the more information that we try to find on this silver mine, these journals, you know, this rock, all this different stuff, not only do things keep getting weirder and weirder for us, but we start hooking up with other creators and other people that are working on certain things in the Appalachian area, a lot of the central Appalachian area. And they're going through some of the same kind of things, you know, parallel, not so much treasure. We're the only ones doing that I know of, unless, you know, people are coming up underneath us right now. But just throwing them out there. Josh and Richie from the Sword and Staff podcast, Ward Heine, who is actually works with Tony he worked with him on the Dogman documentary and the upcoming Skinwalker documentary. He's a videographer. Ward's a great dude. They're working on a project called Shadow Appalachia. Now, Shadow Appalachia is going to be a docuseries. It's coming off of not really a sequel, but it's coming off of a docuseries that was created by Ward Heine called Dark Holler, that's central around a family in southern West Virginia. Now, what they're doing with Shadow Appalachia is they're kind of looking at just the high strangeness in West Virginia, where they're at, in central Appalachia, and kind of expanding that, taking a look outside, you know, all the way like into Point Pleasant and what's going on there, and everything with Chief Cornstalk and, you know, his execution and cursing the land there, and you know, it leading to the Mothman and the Silver Bridge collapse, you know, just kind of looking at all these, like Keel would say, these window areas that for high strangeness, you know, specifically in West Virginia. So we start talking to these guys, and a lot of the things that have been going on run crazy parallel to some of the things that we've been experiencing. Now, when you look all back, at any treasure that you want to talk about all through history, I mean, for God's sakes, Hollywood has made a fortune on cursed treasure. Guardians, guarding this treasure. Dragons have always, any Middle Earth movie you want to talk about, there's a dragon guarding some treasure. There's always these curses. There's always this stuff. And I started looking into treasure and the paranormal, because there's been things that have been going on with us specifically. There was a couple different entities that I really started looking into and digging on. And then I started seeing stuff, and we all know you gaze into the abyss is going to start looking back eventually, if they're not looking already. So I thought, well, it's the research that I'm doing is the reason that I'm having these experiences. And really quickly, Lilith is one of these entities that I was looking into really hard. Every culture, every civilization all throughout history, I believe, have a representation of Lilith, this demonic entity that was, half woman, half bird, said to have owl's feet, wings, that could portray owls, like all this different owl and crow and raven, these carrion predator birds or birds of prey, these features. Well, while I'm researching all this stuff, I see this lady in white one night step out from around my building. Totally freaked me out. I start having these mimic encounters around my house. I hear my wife calling my name from the porch one night. She's nowhere around. My youngest daughter, she starts hearing my voice calling for her throughout the house when I'm not doing it. She actually sees me one time when I wasn't there. So you have these weird little things going on, and I just automatically assumed, well, it's because I'm looking into these entities. If I'm looking and digging, they're going to push back. These boys, we've been seeing owls. It's like getting plagued by owls since all this stuff started. But like with the phenomena, I feel like it can show you whatever it wants to show you. I believe these trickster entities, whatever you want to call them, they can portray anything that they want to have the most effect on you. That's my belief.
And do you think these beings, I'm sorry to interject, but you got me on a roll here with that one. Do you think these beings in a way are defending themselves from your intrusions? Not that you guys are intruders in the sense that you kind of just actually stumbled upon it. You're not like trying to go after these entities. Do you think that it's more like a defense, or do you think they're a part of pulling you into this mystery? Do you think it's almost like you kind of, as you look into them, they're like, oh, you want to know about me? Here, let me show you, and it's not always what you expect.
I think at first we thought it was defense, but now it's more the latter, I think.
Yeah, I had told these boys I have a strange fascination with demonology, and have read just ever since, I don't know why, and it's just a weird one of those things. I just have fascination with it, so I read a ton of these different accounts and just consume a lot of that content. And there was a demonologist who was written, the name slips me right now, but in all of his writings or books or whatever, the thing he always kind of mentions is, it's the more you look into these things and the more you find out about these things, the more they find out about you. Right. So there's a definite give and take of, but you're learning about them, but they're also learning about you. And when we initially started this whole thing, I kind of thought like we just tripped and fell into a cool story, hopefully pays off for us being, filthy rich for the generationally rich for the rest of our lives, which would be awesome. But what are the legitimate chances of that happening? We know small, right? It's a chance, but there's
I say hi. I'm an optimist. I think you guys are on your way to the silver mine. Don't even question it. But
I like the way you think.
Well, and I also want to say, you have a sort of somber tone about this, and I'm someone who is adamantly for knowledge, right? So we need to know if the demons are doing stuff. Don't be afraid when you're researching this stuff, because I think that's a part of where they can spiral you out of what your intention is, which is to find truth, right? They don't want to be known. They want to be in the shadows. When you try to shine light on these beings, they don't want that. They try to trip you up, right?
So exactly, Mark. That was took the words directly out of my mouth. That was the diatribe I was getting to.
Nice.
So like all these things are at first I initially thought we fell into, and then I was like, holy cow, this could happen. Then Matt, this probably won't happen. And then we started having all these crazy things kind of that have never happened to me before. Like I've never had experiences like Justin has or anything like that. So I began to think like, maybe there's something here that doesn't want us to unveil some answers and doesn't want us asking these questions. And maybe there's something they're trying to hide. And maybe we've been put in this position to say, hey, no, what, fellas, screw you all. We're going to find this story out, find out what the freaking truth is, and then tell everybody about it. And then that's kind of the vein that I think we all three kind of fell into, that there's something here that I'm 95% confident that we will find this mine, become generationally wealthy, and then have a story of truth to tell that, yeah, we had some bumps and bruises along the way. There are some entities that try to keep us from finding this thing, but this is how we overcame all of these things.
I say you find the money, the silver, whatever it is, gold, metaphysical treasure, and you don't tell anybody at all, because the mystery is what makes it powerful, and also that'll probably keep you alive longer than
very true, very, very true.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah.
Well, I think it's one, and just kind of piggybacking on what you guys are saying there, I have this strong belief that the gods that we hear about, that were worshipped in all of these civilizations all throughout history, these aren't just some figment made up. They're not figment of people's imaginations. I believe they actually communicated with these entities and looked at them as gods. I believe they brought them knowledge. I believe they brought them information. I believe they were able to give them whatever they wanted in life. Now, there came a time when some of these one God religions started getting, really, really strong and taking up the majority of people's beliefs in belief systems in the world. I believe as the one gods got higher and higher and higher in faith and belief, I believe these other gods went lower and lower and lower and lower and kind of forgotten. Okay. So now we're at a point with podcasting and documentaries and content creation and all of these people that are performing their own research. There's probably thousands of people out there that believe exactly what I just said, that are kind of shining a light back on these old gods, if that's what you want to call them. Now, even though it may not be in the same general concept of, hey, we're calling on these old ones to worship them, we're calling on them so they can come into our lives and give us what we want and do all these different things. I feel like giving these old gods the attention that's starting to come on them, I believe it may be bringing them back a little more. I believe that's why, in my opinion anyway, I believe that's why there's so many more accounts that are coming out now, so much stranger, like the weirdest encounters that you've ever heard have all come out within the last few years, it seems like. It just, all these crazy cryptids that have never been seen before, these rakes and these winged humanoid creatures, and all of these different things. Like, again, I believe this is these entities, or like if you look at them like a Cthulhu, okay, say there's a centralized entity here, but it has all these tentacles. And I'm taking this kind of a little bit from Nick Hinton's playbook, the way he explained it to us. You have this central trickster entity intelligence out there, and it's able to have all these tentacles and to poke holes into our reality. And wherever those rifts come into our reality, wherever that hole is poked, you might have a UFO sighting. You might have a cryptid encounter. You might have a poltergeist encounter. You might have an apparition scene. So it's like the more attention that we're giving them, whether it's positive or negative, the more attention that is being brought on these old gods, I believe they're kind of coming back. I believe they're pushing their way through that, what used to be a wall of a veil that's now more like a sheer curtain of a veil that they can just slide right through. Now, are these entities pushing us in a direction? I hope not. Are they creating some kind of confusing?
Hey, as long as it's not off the side of a cliff, they can push us towards the treasure. That's fine.
Well, you look at, and sorry, I keep going off on tangents, man. My brain's starting to fire.
No, this is all in line with what we're hoping to get into. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Look at Ape Canyon, right? Now, most people know the story of Ape Canyon. These dudes, these miners, they stayed in this cabin overnight. They had all these Sasquatch-like creatures that came and was throwing rocks and screaming at them and even pushed their arm through a door and a window, and they fought these creatures off all night long, right? Everybody knows that story. What most people don't know is that these miners, when they got here to this place where they were going to look for this gold mine, again, we're talking about a mine, they encounter this Vanderwhite, this woman in white, who led them, told them the location and the direction of this gold mine, okay, and told them that there would be an arrow to show up in the sky and lead them to the mine to follow this. Like, they have all these weird psychic encounters. One of the stories is one of these guys was getting ready to scratch something down on a slip of paper. And, in his brain, he thought, I need a writing utensil, and one appeared in his hand. I mean, just these different things. And if you look at demonic encounters all throughout history, when somebody has like a demonic attachment, in some of these cases, they can be walking down the street and think, man, I could really use $100, walk around the corner, and there's $100 bill laying on the sidewalk. Now the majority of the times you have all these really positive things and it turns super dark and negative. Just like these guys are looking for a gold mine. This lady in white, who, the way they talked about it, they adored this woman in white, this Vanderwhite. Well, guess what? It didn't get really good for them because they had to fight off a bunch of Bigfoot all night long and almost died.
Right.
So it's like weird little parallels when you look at certain things like that.
And that's the fun and strange and really mystical side of it, is when you look at these, what everybody from the outside looking in would probably walk away just being like, oh, it's Bigfoot story. But no, there are all these elements to these stories, and that's just one example where, the woman in white and the apes together, it's like there's something else going on here. It's really, really fascinating, man. I don't think that you went off on any tangents at all, in the sense that there are so many interconnections. It's like you were just sort of dancing along the spider web, It may take a little work to go and trace that back, but I'm gonna try here because you mentioned Nick, and Nick was just on this show yesterday. Weird coincidence, because you couldn't have known that episode hasn't come out yet. So I'm glad he came up, because he's a buddy of mine and he definitely is on the right track. And one thing that I've never been able to let go of is this Native American legend, prophecy even, that I've heard, that this, I think her name was Fire Eyes or something. It was a blind Native American Cherokee prophet. Cherokee or Sioux, I might be confusing. It doesn't matter. Regardless, she prophesies that one day, the people that took this land will come back to nature and follow the same ways we used to follow. Like, it's inevitable. You can't escape it. And you see all these weird secret societies worshiping these people, or I'm sorry, people gods, or that's what they call them. And even the old ones, H.P. Lovecraft was sort of in the same atmosphere as the Theosophists, and they were all obsessed with this kind of stuff. The Mormons also sort of developed from that same area of occult interests and spread across to the West, and they have their own treasure stories and stories of gods and things like that. I mean, they even believe that when you pass away, you'll be the god of your own planet somewhere in space. And I think Battlestar Galactica is like based on some Mormon philosophy, if you could believe that. So it definitely has transformed, from this like colonial sort of swashbuckling pirate and Daniel Boone explorer type to really far-fetched things like H.P. Lovecraft cults and technology that's going into the AI, and I know that's a big part of the Pennyroyal series, that whole like hyper-stitching and the computer guy, his crazy computer software that he had right up there in Kentucky. So yeah, it's never the case of a linear trajectory. There's always these like side tangents that appear to be tangents and then become a larger part of the story, because there is just so much that's waiting in the hidden realm. But I don't know. What do you guys think? What are your final thoughts? We're coming up on the top of the second hour here. What do we want to leave the audience with? I mean, you guys have some pretty cool discoveries ahead of you, I'd say. So obviously folks should tune in to your podcast to stay in touch and keep updated on that. But what do you guys foresee 2023 being like?
Well, real quick, touching on those old gods and talking about, the belief and all that, but what does it take for something to have substance? And that's just a collective consciousness, right? So, yeah. I actually thought of an experiment the other day. It would take some time, granted. Would take every religious book, every science book, and trash them, right? Just burn them all. And in 1,000 years, see what comes back. Then we'll know.
Yeah, how history repeats itself.
Then we'll know what's real, what's not.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good final thoughts, Ryan. But I feel like, and I'm sure these boys will bounce off the same thing. I feel 2023 is going to be huge. It's going to be huge for our show, the collaborations that we have coming up, the tribe that we're continuing to build nonstop. And that's the hill folk out there, the community that we're building there with our listeners and audience. And, also the other relationships we're making in the podcasting and content creating community. I feel like it's going to be 2023 is going to be a huge year. Hopefully it'll be a year that we find some silver, but just some final little points and bulletin points before we head out of here. And this is exclusive breaking. My family thinks I'm crazy first info, because I literally only stumbled upon this stuff like 2 days ago, or actually it was over the weekend, because I called these boys at almost midnight freaking out. So excited.
Right on. Let's hear it.
Okay. So we talked about, we've spent this entire episode talking about the importance of the natives and what they did and kind of the basis that they laid here before, white settlers came in and all of these different things. And, so I started thinking to myself, when I started looking into the paranormal and treasure and making these connections, I started really, really thinking, okay, if we're going to understand the Swift Silver Mine, if we're going to understand these journals, if we're going to understand the treasure, we need to understand the man. We need to understand John Swift himself. So I started doing a bunch of digging, and I found out that John Swift is related to the Jonathan Swift, English author, poet, that wrote most everyone knows Gulliver's Travels. He's related to the Jonathan Swift there. So when John Swift first came into America, he was a seafarer, explorer. He kind of had this Swift name, this English Swift name. So he already had recognition and a little bit of clout. He settled in Alexandria, Virginia, and he joined in with General Braddock and his army. So General Braddock and his army, they're marching, and they get kind of circled, and they get beat up pretty bad by the Shawnee that are around the area. Shawnee didn't like what was going on, so they drove them out. Well, Swift, being a smart, man that he was, he decides, what? I'm just going to join up with the Shawnee. I'm going to learn from them and live with them for a while. So when he joins up with the Shawnee were already mining this silver. Swift comes in, kind of says, okay, well, I have these connections. I can get manpower. I can get this. I can get that. Kind of takes over the rights and the control of the operations of mining the silver. But while he was with the Shawnee, he marries, he weds a Shawnee. He takes on a Shawnee wife. This lady's name was Elizabeth Cornstalk, the daughter of Chief Cornstalk. So not only do we have a direct connection from the guy's silver mine that we're trying to find to the Chief Cornstalk, that is literally the basis of the Mothman, Point Pleasant, Silver Bridge collapse, all of that. But they had children. Swift moved on, with his life, ends up going back to England and begging the crown to do something about what's going on in the colonial U.S. or the colonial states. He begs the crown didn't like it. They said, we don't want to hear that crap. They imprisoned him. By the time Swift gets out, he's old, he's blind, he has a whole bunch of silver across the pond that he don't have a clue what's happened with. So when he gets back, he's wifeless, he's familyless, he's penniless. He's trying to find his old mates and go by these visual maps in his brain for where the silver is. Never gets back to it. But he does pick up a love interest in Bean Station, Tennessee, and leaves these journals with her, tells her this whole story, and she's kind of passed it down. But for me, the whole paranormal to treasure connection, I literally just thought, it popped in my brain, I wonder what the connections are there with the paranormal and treasure, and find out that the dead guy's treasure that we're looking for was married to the daughter of the most famous chief in Central Appalachia, who was executed, and upon his execution, cursed the land around it and the people that were doing what they were doing.
Dude, and the weirdest thing is, this whole time my girlfriend has been finishing a painting of come over here, Tara, show him the painting. Look at this. Look what she's been painting. A cornstalk. How could she have had any clue we were going to get into this? And she's over here painting cornstalks. Look at that.
Lance, can we use the word now? Can we use the word now, Lance? Synchronicity.
Unusual coincidence.
Well, and
that's
here's
the
another
mysticism behind it.
Here's another unusual coincidence. I typed in John Swift because I'm like, oh, that sounds familiar. And a guy that was born on that Hammonasset line that we were talking about in Kent, Connecticut, he founded the colony or the town of Palmyra, which is where Mormonism started. So another John Swift, who probably, I mean, could have a relation in some way to that Swift. I mean, who knows how common that name is, but here we go, having like this, you know, doppelganger thing. You have the famous author Jonathan Swift, you have this John Swift, and your John Swift. I mean, Jesus, swiftly becoming strange.
Yeah, gosh, for sure, dude. This is nuts.
Wow.
This is nuts. She's painting corn stalks, and what kind of bird is that? They're pecking the corn at the bottom of the painting.
Well, it's white. I don't think she's finished painting it yet. It's just a white outline for now. What do you think, Tara? What's that bird going to be? I thought when we sketched it that it might be a raven, but that's my idea, not hers. She'll come up with something. We'll send you the picture. You got pictures to send me. I'll send you the finished product. But
absolutely.
Wow, this has been so much fun. I love how the synchronicities unfold live that way. Unusual coincidences as well. I think, you know, there's a little truth in both of those terms. And I think the fun of synchronicities is when you find yourself involved, but that also can be the dangerous part too. So folks listening at home, proceed with caution and tune in to Appalachian Intelligence. Don't call it Appalachian Intelligence. Get hip to the Appalachian Intelligence. And yeah, until next time, folks, thank you so much for being here. Any final thoughts you guys want to plug? Anything before we go? I don't want to leave you guys without giving your final statements. Give everybody a chance to pipe in.
Just thank you so much for having us, man. This was a lot of fun.
Agreed.
Co-sign.
Right on. Well, until next time, folks, thank you so much for tuning in and enjoy the moment wherever you are in the now.
N.E.M.M.E.S.S.I.S.S. Yeah. Broadcasting the moon matrix from the lunar surface. They want you confused, like you never knew your purpose. Hopping through the portals, dismantling the machine. My family thinks I'm crazy, I can't believe what I've seen. Memories of a war, the Pleiadians and Anunnaki stuck within the genes of a copy of a human body. DNA fractal, the universe within me. Epiphanies of science is hoarded by the Illuminati. Puppet masters know the power of the mantra, repeating mad lies till it has an effect on ya. Subliminal messages hijack your perception, tricking the population with holographic projections. We see through it, the system is unraveling. I'm astral traveling through the library of the Vatican on a sacred journey. I embark with the squad, forever spitting truth like Mark on the pod. Gotta know the facts, never hold back, cause I ain't getting caught up in the soul trap. I dissect the fabric of reality, looking for the answers, searching through the galaxy. You might be feeling stressed out. Depression, anxiety is no measure of health. To be well adjusted to a sick society. You don't even know how powerful you are. We the ones who gonna expose the whole facade. I awoke in a deep underground military base. Zero recollection of how I got to this place. Alien corpses floating in glass cylinders. Must have been extracted when they crashed into us. Animal hybrids contained in the cages. A lion with the eagle head, monkeys with reptilian faces. Losing my mind and I'm feeling desperate. I look around the room and I see no sign of an exit. All of a sudden the wall flickers away, revealing a hangar full of spacecraft. My getaway, I run to the nearest one. See a guard knock him out, rob him for his plasma gun. Hop in the ship, take the controls. They highly intuitive, I figure it out easily. Lift off, accelerate through a tunnel until I see the light. Fly into the sky, get flanked by 6 F-35s. Gotta know the facts, never hold back, cause I ain't getting caught up in the soul trap. I dissect the fabric of reality, looking for the answers, searching through the galaxy. You might be feeling stressed out. Depression, anxiety is no measure of health. To be well adjusted to a sick society. You don't even know how powerful you are. We the ones who gonna expose the whole facade.